Control.
And Francisco starting off, fetching his Flutter Strand on turn 1. Indicative of maybe he's playing a Deathray Shaman or possibly a Ponder?
I don't think this is Deathblade.
Okay.
I think this is actually just straight up Esper control. So I think the turn 1 play with fetching an Underground telegraphs a Thoughtseize or maybe an Inquisition, but
okay. And these main deck cards are very good to break up. And see the Thoughtseize. And a spell pierce from Kris, very very powerful, protecting the hand. But these main deck discard spells are very powerful against one way the Sneak and Show's combo can get broken up.
Right, definitely. Oh, this is a very fast start.
Here we go, ring a ding. Let's get the party started. And here Francisco having to force the will.
Yeah, he needs to force the will there. If he doesn't
Chances are he doesn't have something more powerful than Kris.
Right. If he doesn't have the counterspell there, it's not looking good for Francisco. But he does have the counterspell, so we will see next turn.
A little bit technical. Here we go. Back online.
So we have Stoneforge Mystic on his turn.
There's the aforementioned Stoneforge Mystic, and this is how Francisco can. He can't sit around all day. Kris King has so many live. He has so many live draws off the top of his deck that Francisco has to get the game over with.
Right. Even if he had a spell pierce or an interactive spell there, I'm still in the camp of just casting the Stoneforge Mystic to have a threat next turn.
I agree.
He already interacted with his opponent. He just needs to be able to, kill him before Kris is given too much of a chance to rebuild.
Absolutely.
That being said, Kris can just have another show.
He can just have it. And a lot of the times, when I was playing the deck, you have these draws that are multiple show and tells and actually no action, but your opponent is forced to counter the show and tell for fear of something following it.
And that's actually I've kind of seen this a lot, but the Sneak and Show players playing Overmaster in their sideboard, which is a card that says your next instant sorcery can't be countered, you draw a card, and basically the control player is actually forced to counter the Overmaster, and so people just play that without actually having a show and tell in hand.
And here we see a bit of an unconventional choice. Two main deck Jace Archetype, or Jace Mindscope. I know you're a strong proponent of this. There are multiple Miracle decks in the room today, and Sneak and Show, while that is a bad matchup, can go very fast as we see a turn 3 Jace. And on this open board, that's very powerful.
Yeah, he just gets to bounce the Stoneforge Mystic. Now Francisco doesn't have a threat until 2 turns from now, and next turn he's probably just going to be able to brainstorm.
Yeah, and we can assume that if the Jace resolves, any piece of action following, Kris will be able to resolve through with no contest.
Right. However, we do see Snapcaster into a Thoughtseize.
And there's some gas. There is gas. No lands to cast these spells. I imagine it's the monster.
Yeah, you probably.
The redundant copy of Sneak Attack is. It doesn't help to take the first one if he's going to be left with the second one.
Right, so you probably just take the Gristlebrand here. And
when you're Thoughtseizing and you see A, B, you generally take B.
Right.
In the A plus B paradigm.
You're still getting used to it.
And Francisco thinking about this.
The right idea. You've done this before.
An interesting choice.
So actually take Sneak Attack here, which means it probably has another discard spell in hands.
Yeah, or a Force of Will. Maybe he drew the Force of Will or the second blue card.
Right. Even still, I would probably take the Gristlebrand.
I agree. But possibly Francisco knows something we don't. I've never piloted Esper Control, so. And now Kris, in his main phase, going over his options. I think that's where we're starting.
Yeah.
The Snapcaster can't threaten the Jays, and turns out Brainstorm, pretty good effect.
Yeah, so Brainstorm, but that does mean that his Snapcaster is going to be able to hit the Jace next turn and just get it off the board.
Sorry, I wanted to ask really quick.
I like how we both went to Summer.
And a really good drop here from Kris off this. So now it's go time. Kris has all the pieces that he needs. And if Francisco doesn't have a response to this show and tell, this is a monster in play. Show and telling Sneak Attack, activating Sneak Attack for Gristlebrand.
Or we just see show and tell to bring in Gristlebrand.
To make the Gristlebrand. I generally like to have the haste option because here Kris can go draw 7, find a pedal and an Emrakul, and just end the game.
Right, he actually can just end the game here, which is, being at 18 life, he gets to draw 14.
Yeah, and not letting friends. And here Kris going with the option of just making the Gristlebrand, which is fine. But if Francisco has something like a Liliana of the Veil, this line is entirely disrupted.
We do have draw 14.
Sure.
We still have draw 14.
Fair. It's good, but I like making the sneak attack and activating and hoping for the kill this turn and just getting the game over with.
Next turn we do have that possibility too, because we'll just be able to swing with the Gristlebrand, and we can see a land Emrakul, and that's enough to, or lands.
He'd need a red source. He'd need a red source.
He would need a red source. You're correct.
Yeah, take a shot.
Here we have the swords. In response to the swords, we're gonna draw 7. And traditionally, when the Sneak and Show player gets to draw 7 with a healthy life total and under no duress, that's generally the game.
I'm not sure if I can either.
Yeah, we'll probably see a Force Wheel here. Maybe even a Misdirection. I know that card is main board, so Misdirection here would be real
nice.
good.
Real nice.
Slingers. Yeah, slingers.
Look at this. Looks like a brainstorm. I might have drawn another 7 before casting the brainstorm.
If he does draw 7
He does under 4,
here,
but then he'd get 7 from the swords, correct?
yeah, okay,
This
sure.
guy's total isn't under any duress at the moment. And able to take 6 from creatures in play.
Maybe he actually already saw the forces, but didn't want to pitch the blue cards he saw. I'm not sure. He actually just takes the draw.
He feels like maybe he has enough action in his hand, and keeping his life total at 18 is. Because here we see the swords resolve, gaining 7.
Yeah, we might actually have the Emrakul and the red source in hand or something. But I mean, if we had the counterspell, I might have just cast it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kris untapping with a grip full of cards. Pretty much, if the opponent didn't counter this show until last turn, you imagine the floodgates are open and you just have the ability to just go off. And there's the red source that he needed, paddle. Now we have multiple activations. And if he doesn't have a monster, including the sneak attack that we knew about, I'd be surprised. And here we have show and tell.
So we have multiple activations of sneak attack if we do resolve this spell.
Absolutely.
Anything but to kill.
So you guys are just tuning in. We have Kris King with Sneak and Show, still game 1 versus Esper Control. We had an activation to Gristlebrand this game, and a couple activations from Jason from Sneak and Show. So looking pretty good for him, and the show and tell is resolving. So we just have another Gristlebrand's.
Kris King not opting for the kill, just making a 7/7 lifelink in this matchup could just be good enough on its own.
Right.
Not to mention that it can gain cards.
And then this guy on the end.
You might just like drawing cards.
Yeah, I like it.
So that's another kill.
I'm gonna have a talk with him after this game, though. I'm gonna let him know my opinion on the line.
Yeah, I think it's definitely more along the line of play sneak attack, activate, put in Gristlebrand's, activate Gristlebrand, find Emrakul, swing with both. And he's bound to have seen a counterspell in the cards you've seen.
He's gone through a good number of cards.
Right. And we did just draw off the top there from the ponder, so he liked his 3
He
there.
kept the 3 cards, so with a grip full of hands up to 7, no discard.
I'm going to make sure on these life totals, because that might be the discrepancy.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we have Francisco going over his options.
Another one I'm missing.
A bit under the gun in the face of this Gristlebrand.
Yeah, no, that's the thing about the Reanimator and Sneak and Show decks is even if you're having trouble resolving your spells, if you ever just have a Gristlebrand on the field, the other deck very rarely can beat it. If you ever get Gristlebrand on the field, you can hardly beat it.
In the worlds of Swords to Plowshare, Swords to Plowshare being the go-to way to answer this card, obviously Abrupt Decay doesn't hit it. Cards like Maelstrom Pulse are seen little to no play.
Yeah.
Gaining 7 when you're paying 7 to draw 7 is a pretty good deal. Kill my guy, I'll draw 7 for free. Deal. That's good.
Yeah, when you're able to, if you're at a comfortable life total, just drawing 7 cards, if they remove it, then you're just back at the same life total. It doesn't even matter.
Absolutely. Very rarely do I can resolve an Emrakul, attack with my Emrakul off sneak attack, and lose the game. That has happened to me before. Very rarely do I put in a 7/7 lifelink via Gristlebrand and lose the game.
Right. and have it hit at least.
Yeah, of course. Here we have a Snapcaster Mage. Go into that. Look at that swords in the graveyard. And Kris King here might be content to, depending on his hand, let this resolve. Okay, and here we have draw 7 in response. Nope, we have Force pitching Spellpierce. It was hard to believe that he didn't have a way to answer that sword.
Right, after seeing so many cards and opting not to shuffle off the Ponder, like he's bound to have a counterspell there. Was that?
Or the like 5 games I played, they've been
Was that end step or that was main phase?
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to get around this Crystal Brand and not have to fight through it. We probably won't see a combat step here from Francisco if he doesn't have another removal spell.
And with one card in hand from Francisco, Kris King was looking to be in pretty commanding position.
Right, and life totals are correct. So we have a Kris King at 11, so he's able to draw 7 cards, and I think he still has a sneak attack in play or in his hand, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so if Kris is able to combo together sneak attack and Emrakul, Francisco is just dead.
Right, no.
He is just dead. That is 22. Get you dead.
Not to mention the sacrifice 6 permanents.
And here we have a Ponder. Maybe not consequential, but tapping the Volcanic. Your red source is in such high demand with activation of sneak attack that tapping. I would have gone with the basic island. Not going to matter here, I don't think.
Okay. Gonna activate the Cipher.
And here it looks like
we're going to go down to 9.
sneak attack with one floating, one colorless floating. Activating for red, Emrakul, and this is just dead. He's just dead. I don't imagine Francisco has a piece of action in his hand. So we have an activation Jite for show. I mean, Francisco thinks to sacrifice for Annihilator Trigger, but I don't think he realizes that.
Yeah, it's just actually 22 damage.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
We see him scooping him up.
And Kris King, the world was his oyster. Maybe some suboptimal lines, but in the end, gets the job done.
Yeah, I mean, at any point he was able. At one point, he was able to have Crystal Brand in play, and he just kind of let the swords resolve. And then the next turn, he just show and tell Crystal Brand again, and it almost got swords again, but he was able to force it. Like he landed 2 Crystal Brands on the field. Very, very unlikely that he's going to lose that game, especially when his lifetime wasn't being threatened.
I agree.
But yeah, kind of interesting lines. I might have just wanted to cast sneak attack.
Yeah,
Couple turns earlier.
I think the first time we saw show and tell for Gristlebrand, that could have just been show and tell for sneak attack. Activate, put in Gristlebrand, draw 7 again. The odds that you don't hit Petal Gristlebrand in that turn are pretty low, and that's just the game over.
Yeah.
And while you're probably way ahead, and you probably can't lose to anything that your opponent can do in the subsequent 2 turns following.
Right.
There's no reason to give him the free draw steps.
Yeah, even if at the point, there's no point where his life total was certain enough to where he couldn't activate twice just to find the Emrakul, and even if it was, if he just saw if he was able to swing afterwards and then draw another 7 and put him to 4 where his life total was certain, he just needs to see Lotus Petal Crystal Brand again, and then he just gets to activate on his own turn to block or something. There's so many ways that he wasn't going to lose that game.
Yeah, and that's a line. I had played the deck for about a month before that line had even occurred to me to use your sneak attack defensively.
Yeah.
And I actually conceded a game where I thought I was dead on board with a Gristlebrand in my hand because I'm thinking about the cards in a proactive, these are cards that are ending the game for me.
Right.
Not being able to just flash in and block your Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. Block your Tarmogoyf and then draw 7.
Yeah. Turns out that's a good play.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So they're probably sideboarding at this point. Do we see what do we see from Francisco maybe coming in? We took a look at their sideboard, or his sideboard at least, and there was some number of Liliana's.
Liliana's good.
Liliana's fairly good. It kind of shuts off their hand a little bit. You don't have the mana acceleration that you would in a Jund deck or your bug deck, where you can get it out on turn 2, but it's still fairly good on turn 3. Maybe not as definitely not as good, but still good.
The sneak attack, the sneak and show deck can have a draw that isn't super explosive. It has a couple of cantrips, has a force of will, maybe has one piece of the combo, and all it takes is for them to cast a Ponder, shuffle their Ponder, and then draw a couple bricks, and the Esper control deck can have some time to get his footing in the game.
Right, and it is a two-piece combo. If he doesn't already have sneak attack in play, he needs 2 cards in hand. If at any point he gets to 0 cards in hand, it's very difficult for him to win it from there.
Yeah, I completely agree. One beautiful thing about the combo strategy is that unlike a deck like say Storm, where it requires this mass accumulation of spells, the sneak attack deck gets to just go 1-2. So I have been in games where I'm just completely, I'm dead 2 turns later. I have no cards in hand, and I just run a runner and it's a thing. You know what I mean? You're 2 draws away from killing your opponent at any point.
By the same token, though, with Liliana out, you need the 2 cards. You need the 2 cards, and you only have 1. So
I anticipate Francisco bringing in fast ways to interact with what Kris is doing on the other side of the table and discard and cards like Spell Pierce, Force of Will.
Right. It's not a card I see often now, just because I don't think Snapcaster is as good as it was maybe like a year and a half ago. But Surgical Extraction is actually fairly good in this matchup. If you're able to exile one of their creatures, maybe you thought Caesar Crystal Brand turn 1 and then Surgical Extract it, they actually are going to have a very difficult time winning the game because Emrakul, you have to see it blindly. You just have to see it off your cantrips. You can't draw 7 to find it, and it doesn't actually win the game.
I agree.
As you said before.
So from Kris King's side, what do you think he's bringing in to be a little bit more robust to this discard that he knows is coming in?
I like Pyroclasms actually in this matchup. It gets rid of Snapcasters, Stoneforge Mystics, and maybe some Meddling Mages or something post-board.
Sure, you can assume that type of effect may be coming in on it.
Right. After Pyroclasms, I'm not actually sure. He might actually bring in Red Blast. I don't think Blood Moon's coming in. It didn't seem that relevant.
There's a lot of basics on the other side of the table.
Yeah. Or there wasn't a lot that game, but I assume there could be.
Sure.
What do you think? I couldn't think of anything much else from the sideboard.
No,
you're more familiar with it than I am.
Yeah, the Pyroclasms seem good. I'm not sure I want 3 of them.
Yeah.
We didn't see it that game, but you can imagine that this type of deck is bringing a card called True Name Nemesis into play. A blue deck playing Stoneforge Mystic generally will combo that with the 3/1 protection from all of your things.
Right.
In which case Pyroclasm doesn't do what we wanted to do.
Definitely. I don't think True Names... We saw it in Francisco's main board. Not in the game, but when we were looking at it, and I don't think True Name's very good in this matchup. It's just too slow.
Sure.
You want something that Stoneforge, where you can kind of keep your mana up on his turn and then put in a threat.
Okay,
which is very good.
And your 3 needs to be a card like Liliana that is actually
something that's actually interacting with him. So yeah, not a lot. Probably not a lot of ways to interact with True Name anyway in the red-blue deck, but...
So Kris King, he saw a certain amount of his opponent's deck, but really we only saw about 4 different cards.
Right.
We saw Stoneforge Mystic, we saw Snapcaster Mage, we saw Inquisition, and we saw Force.
Right.
So when you're going up against a deck where you may not know his game plan, there may be a 3rd color that we don't know about. There may be, we don't know if he's playing Jace, we don't know if he's playing... We can assume maybe some Meddling Mage type effects that are coming in. There's a lot of Echoing Truth from the Sneak and Show deck.
Definitely.
Comes in almost all the time. Unless you know that there's nothing that they can punish you for not having that effect in your deck, you just bring it in the blind.
Right, you bring it in just in case they accidentally side in Pithing Needle or Phyrexian Invoker, that kind of effect for your sneak attacks, or the Meddling Mage, just get rid of their Meddling Mage for the turn and then be able to resolve your threat.
Certainly.
So let's go over to the game, see what's going on here. Looks like they're looking at their 7s. If you guys are just tuning in, we are now in Game 2. Sneak and Show up a game against the Esper control deck. Kind of a Sneak and Show taking it kind of handedly last game, resolving 2 Gristle Brands off Show and Tells. And the Esper control deck not having very many answers to it.
Yeah, and if you're just tuning in, we're in round 2 of Legacy presented by Dark Tower Games of Bellingham, Washington. Thursday night we do a Legacy tournament just about every Thursday night. We have a good, if you look in the room, we have a draft going on as well. There's about 20 people in the room doing the various tournaments. So a good showing.
He looks like a fun caster.
And here we have a very explosive draw from Kris. And if we have there's a fast chase, and if Francisco does not answer, this can run away with the game.
Okay, so, little dude.
How do we have 2 lands in play and no lands for Francisco?
I'm not sure. I missed that.
Guessing we saw
A daze or a... I'm going to figure that out for you guys.
So, I'm only 6, but I'm going to core orange.
Huh. So we might have kept a no-lander here, which is fairly interesting with Force of Will. I've seen it before. It's worked before. I'm guessing maybe he has Venser in hand or something, kind of playing off the show and tell from Kris's side. But
Yeah, so it seems that Francisco might have had a misstep, passed the turn preemptively, without playing his land for the turn. Maybe that's a bit of nerves, or just, you know, we do all the haphazard things.
gotcha. So we're going to see bottom from this preordain, and then we're going to draw a card.
Where the X-Wing at?
Avid X-Wing player in our stream chat.
Yeah, what night is that?
That is actually Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock. We have X-Wing. Super sweet game if you guys are into tabletops. One of my favorite games now, actually, right behind Magic.
I got to come in a few days ago and watch him with one of our buddies play, and while I was having a hard time understanding the mechanics, I really enjoyed the fact that there were guys flying around. I don't know if I could stop myself from going pew-pew every 30 seconds, but, you know.
It's actually funny, the grand finals of the World Championship of X-Wing last year, they were commentating and saying how the guys were actually like making pew pew noises.
You would have to.
These are like 40-year-old guys, and they're all like traveling across the country to play this Magic tournament in the finals, and they're still making like Star Wars noises. It's really sweet.
So here we have Francisco going into, I believe it's turn 3. Fetch land, maybe turn 4. Land drop for the turn. And Francisco would like to have some action. Kris King showing a little bit of, you know, after that Jason, didn't seem like he had much going on. The preordain on the next turn, putting both to the bottom, indicates that Kris is looking for something that he doesn't have.
Right, and he does have 5 cards in hand. He might be waiting to like hold up, you know, double spell pierce, show and tell, or like spell pierce sneak attack.
Sure.
Like he might have a mana intensive spell that he wants to cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he might just be waiting on that. And Francisco isn't putting on pressure, so he's giving him time.
And here we see the Stoneforge mistake. Francisco, this is what his game plan is revolving around. He needs to get the game over with. It says control on the right side, but we don't want to give Kris too many draws. We want to close out the game as fast as possible.
Right. It doesn't have the late game inevitability that the Miracles deck has, nor does it have the like 500 for 1 card like Counterbalance or Terminus or Entreat the Angels. So it's definitely needs to play a threat. It's more of a proactive control deck.
7.
So Kris King is starting out. It looks like a cantrip to start off. Here we have a mainframe brainstorm. And there's kind of a sliding scale with players in Legacy. So when you start playing Brainstorm at first, you want to just play it as soon as possible and just draw cards, right?
And then you learn how to do it at the end step. That's rank 2.
You want to fetch in place. You want to wait till it fetch and do it on the end step. And then the really good players know when to just main phase their Brainstorm when they absolutely need the gas, or when to do it when they don't have a fetch in play.
Right.
We see resolving Brainstorm, 2 back, passing of the turn. We'll see a fetch here on Francisco's turn.
Looks like we actually
Kris likes them all, so yeah, that's not a bad spot to be.
So if we don't see something here, I'm really questioning Kris's Brainstorm there, because he didn't fetch at the end of turn to get rid of the cards on top.
And here's a pedal. Doesn't always indicate that it's go time, but a lot of times when you see these 0 mana spells coming out of the hand, it's time to party. And here we see Kris passing the turn, content with just waiting. He's under no pressure. This batter school isn't, it's a 5-turn clock.
This doesn't get in the way. I can try to
I mean, 3 of those guys charge at now 17. I think you actually get
these guys all run.
I think you can at least get that dude over there too. I think you can do 3 max.
So what could we think that Kris's hand is? He didn't play a land.
I'm actually not sure.
Waiting on.
I'm guessing it's sneak attack. I would be very.
We think we're missing a monster.
Yeah, something like that. I'd be very tentative to show and tell against a deck running blue and small creatures without some sort of reaction to that. Like if he just show and tells in a sneak attack and he puts a revoker or a pithing needle, or even just like Venser, then it's very, a very big tempo play from Francisco where he kind of just wasted a spell. So he might be just waiting to cast sneak attack. So he's kind of playing the proactive, where Francisco doesn't really have an option to interact with him there.
Sure. Now it looks like we have a discrepancy on life totals. Francisco really breaking serve in this game. Kris King did it with the Jace early that got countered, and this is Francisco's first piece of action.
Right.
And while these players figure out their life totals, we'll go do the same.
So if you guys are just tuning in, we are in round 2. This is game 2, Sneaky Show versus Esper Control.
Francisco is 21.
So we have 13 to 21, and Kris not doing much of anything. Finally see a fetch, so we did shuffle away one of the cards that he put back with Brainstorm.
Okay. And with keeping one of those cards and only getting rid of one, you have to imagine that his hand is very good.
Yeah, I would imagine so, but we haven't seen any action from him. I'm hoping that we see something this turn.
Pierce, maybe he's waiting on an extra land to keep up a Spell Pierce, like double Spell Pierce, keep up a Swan Song, those could have came in.
However, we see tap both the blue sources. Oh, Through the Breach is
Through
another
the
card.
Breach, coming in, I like it. It's a good card, and that's what we were waiting on.
Wait,
He's got the requisite mana.
he paid 1 extra for his sneak attack?
1, 2, yeah. Has to tap, it's single red, so... Is there another land under that mountain? That's only 4 mana.
Yeah, sneak attack is 4 mana.
Sneak attack, I'm thinking Through the Breach.
Yeah, he did not cast Through the Breach. That's what I thought he was casting because he tapped 5, but then he
yeah,
untapped 1.
absolutely, we're all good.
So we are actually casting a sneak attack here. And
Maybe Kris is waiting for multiple activations to maybe get the game over with.
Right, or maybe waiting for a time where Francisco is a little bit more tapped out, but now he's kind of running out of time because we have a Batterskull in play.
Absolutely. Here we have Francisco responding
With a
I
Brainstorm.
believe the sneak attack's on the stack.
Sneak attack is on the stack. We have a Brainstorm from Francisco, and that is looking pretty good for Kris. Maybe Francisco already has a counterspell, is looking for another, kind of weighing his options, but seeing a Brainstorm in response to your spell is pretty good. Definitely not going to bait a counterspell from Kris here.
One sweet period.
And, Kris had a few turns where he kept one of the cards off the Brainstorm. He had a few turns where he didn't play a land, so we know he has spells in hand. And this is the turn, this is where he wants to go. And
Right. He waited long enough to where his life total wasn't threatened enough. He can still activate Gristerbrand fairly comfortably.
Yep.
And now he probably has more counterspells, more ways to interact with Francisco's hate. So we see a Force of Will. Force of Will pitching a Ponder. So that'll bring Francisco down to 20.
this is... I imagine we have double Spell Pierce here if this is the... this is the line. And if Francisco has a Spell Pierce back, this is really bad. And it appears that he does. So this is a really good turn for Francisco, and if Kris King doesn't have anything left in the tank, we could be seeing a game 3 shortly.
Yeah, definitely. Man, not the counterspells you want to see here. Misdirection might have been nice.
Yeah.
Because you basically 2-for-1'd yourself anyway by having with him having mana up and casting 2 Spell Pierces. You just want to see the hard counter there.
It makes me go back to that Brainstorm play where Kris kept a card, and it may have not been the right... he has to go for it there.
Right. Maybe fetching, possibly seeing like a Force of Will or a Misdirection off the top rather than keeping a Spell Pierce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the further, Kris was setting himself to where he was giving Francisco a couple of turns to develop his mana base, and Spell Pierce is one of those cards that certainly diminishes as the game progresses. When your opponent is able to pay for both of your cards, it's not where we want to be.
Yeah, the soft counters are less good the longer you go in the game, and if Kris was planning on, not playing anything for the first couple turns, I would definitely like to see more hard counters in his hands if he was choosing to go that route. We see Humility. Wow. So humility will
Can't beat
actually,
that card.
yeah, it'll actually increase the clock by 1 turn because it's now 6 damage. The germ token is actually a 1/1 off
Sure.
humility.
Gas. And now all the Crisp King's monsters aren't doing anything. And this one looks like it will be wrapped up in short order. This is where that one of Echoing Truth would come in handy.
Right, and now just we have to use the Echoing Truth on the germ there not to die.
Yeah,
And we didn't even have it, so.
On to game 3. A match that was seeming favorable for Kris. All of a sudden, you know,
Yeah.
the Francisco sideboard plan is a little bit more focused, a little bit more sculpted. He knows the problematic cards now maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, the humility is actually fairly good there. I haven't seen that card a lot in Legacy just because as a 4 mana enchantment, it doesn't do a lot against some decks. Like a lot of times, like Miracles are bringing that. I've seen Miracles bringing that, and then they just die to 1/1s.
Sure.
Or their Angels just aren't enough. Or like if you're making 6 Angels for 8 instead of, or 6 1/1s for 8 instead of 6 Angels, like that's not actually going to win you the game that fast.
Sure. And you see, in this format, when your spells are so powerful, the curve is so low, 4 mana is a lot to invest into a card, and if it's not the best Planeswalker ever printed or winning the game, it might not be good enough. Well, we can argue about that at a different time. I'm not sure if that card is good enough for this format, but you know, when it's looking against the Jace, it's pretty good.
Definitely. Yeah, humility is definitely like a card I would bring in here, but it's also kind of awkward because it could just be like stuck in your hand. You could be stuck on mana, or they just kill you before it ever does anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is fairly good against show and tell though, and that now Kris has that information where he knows I can't show and tell against the second anymore
Absolutely.
as well.
Yep.
So-
and that might be a case where these through the breaches that we know about might come in.
Right.
Because when your show and tells get worse, generally after board, decks are bringing a card like Oblivion Ring, an effect like Pithing Needle. Your show and tells get a little worse. And so the game plan, you never really side them out, but you want to go into ways to where maybe you can just show and tell. They bring in something destructive, and then you have other things to do. You can through the breach, you can make your sneak attack.
Right.
You get 2 extra of that effect in case they break up the first one.
Definitely. And you just kind of like, what do you think you cite out for those? Like maybe just like your preordains, or do you just cite out your extra show and tells now? What's the game plan there? I just don't know.
It's hard. It's hard. It's not.
It's not a 1-for-1. It's not
Yeah,
always the same.
it's not clear. The show and tells can come out. There's certain times where you just want, and generally I feel like when you're seeing opposing force levels, you're less trying to fight over the individual effect, and you just want a lot of that effect. You want to just be able to go turn 2 show and tell, counter it. Turn 3 sneak attack, counter it. Turn 4 through the breach, counter it. We'll make another one, and eventually you're gonna run them out of resources.
Right.
So you just. If they're the reactive deck and they're responding to your powerful play, you just want to have multiple of that play. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So we're just going to go back to our game, see what's going on here. So we are, looks like we're in the think tank about our opening 7s. But now both decks with a win here. We are in game 3. It looks like
Francisco's going back.
Francisco's going back and Kris keeping.
Kris took a bit of time to deliberate over that hand, so he might be on a bit of a weak start.
Right. I mean, I think he's okay with that. I think the Esper deck gives him a bit of time to kind of sculpt his hands and pick a turn to go off rather than just trying to jam out spells really early. So I think he's okay with kind of a sketchy keep as long as it's, pretty cantrip heavy or has, I don't know what kind of sketchy keep it would be bad to keep, but maybe like 1 landers, no cantrip. But if he has cantrips, if he has action, we're fine.
Certainly. Interestingly enough, some of the hands that I find are seemingly traps is when you don't have either of your combo pieces, but you have multiple cantrips. You have 2 ponders and a brainstorm and maybe a fetch land, and it seems really good, right? But if those cantrips don't get you there, then your hand is not doing anything.
Right.
It's really like you want so. If you have 3 cards, you'd like one of them to be an action spell and then 2 cantrips.
Right, you just want to find one of your pieces, not necessarily both.
Yeah. Here we have a ponder, so shuffling off the ponder. And this is if this ponder doesn't hit, we can see one of those hands that just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible.
A little too early to say, but
Sure.
oh, we actually have
that
fetch
was
land.
resolving the fetch line.
Okay, we're good. We have an actual ponder here.
Sure.
So if he goes away, I'm going to drop a watcher. That noise.
I'm not so sure about the 6 here from the Esper deck. I mean, I think he needs all his cards in this matchup. He doesn't have a super good combo game. His main interaction spells are his Thought Seizes. His Spell Pierce isn't that good, and he only runs like 3 to 4 Force of Will.
Sure. And
That's
even then,
permission.
a deck where your permission requires 2 cards, going down cards is bad. It's
Definitely.
not going to help. And if Kris is on that plan of
I'm surprised how
Ouch. We see a Brainstorm here for Francisco. End
maybe
step.
an end step,
Yeah.
indicative of needing a land.
Yeah, even if I did need a land, though, I would definitely wait till his main phase to see an extra card, but we are going to see a end step Brainstorm here. And Kris is kind of sitting pretty with Island, Scalding Tarn here, maybe a cantrip at the end of
If he has a
Francisco's
brainstorm,
turn.
that's really strong.
Yeah, being able to hold up and open mana for Francisco's threats, and
And here we have Francisco with it. If he had made the play as you mentioned, he would have a perfect brainstorm rather than having to keep one of the cards if he doesn't want to.
right.
If he has nothing else to do with his mana on turn 2, which it seems like he doesn't, and Kris with the brainstorm, and it will be able to make it a perfect brainstorm.
Yeah, we're going to see Brainstorm, put 2 back, and probably shuffle here, putting away 2 cards that he doesn't necessarily need right now.
And if Francisco didn't have anything to do with his mana on turn 2, I think I like that play a lot more, of just waiting to your main phase to brainstorm.
Definitely,
Seeing if-
yeah. Unless, I mean, the only thing I can think of is like double Spell Pierce or Spell Pierce Swords, which Swords isn't even that good.
Double Spell Pierce at this stage of the game is pretty unnecessary. Generally, the first one will get there when your opponent, even with a Petal and a Soul Land, will at the most have 4 mana,
Right.
or 5 mana.
That's barring Kris has no counter spells.
Of course,
so.
of course.
So.
That guy. Those guys are actually. Yes, it's true. They are indeed.
And here we see Kris not fetching. He likes the cards that he's seeing.
Alright, I'm going to add corollary.
That's a good spot to be in.
That is a very good
I saw
spot.
him last turn though make this play and proceed to lose.
Yeah, so hopefully Kris actually liked the cards, didn't forget to fetch.
Maybe need some more. He's on the play this game. Francisco may be stumbling on lands. He's made both of his land drops so far, but obviously the in-step brainstorm kind of indicating that he does need more land.
Yeah,
Possibly.
if we liked all the cards in our hand, I don't even think I'd brainstorm.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm going to activate Lucan next. Lucan is going to go ahead and swing at the dude.
2 attacks on the other guy.
So we're going to see a shuffle from Francisco. He's going to get rid of one of the cards he saw off Brainstorm. And we're going to go into his main phase here.
It's a rare draw from a combo deck, just like Sneak and Show, where you are looking at a hand that has a brainstorm and you like all of your spells. There's generally an extra land you want to get rid of, a redundant copy of your combo piece that you don't need.
Definitely. If you're sitting on like 2 Gristlebrand or Gristlebrand Everglow and you have a show and tell in hand, like obviously you don't need the second one.
Absolutely.
Understand why you would run away. Alright, well, he's not.
So Kris being happy with his grip and Francisco making his land drops, but not progressing his board, and he needs to take the first 2 turns,
Actually, no.
the first 2 or second or third turn to make something happen. If Francisco doesn't have an action spell here, maybe he feels like he can't tap out for one. But he's not going to win the game just by sitting and letting Kris sculpt the perfect hand.
Right.
I don't need
Not liking the second card.
So we do get rid of 1 card.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. If he did have 1 card in hand that he didn't like, but then saw 3 on the top that he did like, I could see brainstorming there and then fetching to get rid of that 1 card. And that to me just means Kris is kind of in a good position here.
Here we see Kris getting a second basic, playing around Wasteland. We haven't seen it the first 2 games, I don't believe, but you never know.
Yes, there's no reason not to. You only really, if he thinks he's not playing Caracas, you really only need 1 red at a time.
And here we have a Soul Land, and he's cracking his Scalding Tarn main phase. I think this is go time.
Yeah, we're probably going to see a sneak attack
You
here.
think he gets Basic Mountain?
Or I think we get Basic Mountain.
Yep.
And we'll probably see either a Show and Tell with Spell Pierce open, or we'll see our Spell Pierce mana open, and then we'll see a sneak attack with your own Spell Pierce in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we mentioned, if Francisco has the humility, this could be a risky play in Show and Tell. And here we have a Blood Moon.
Oh, yes.
His other big skill on him.
So this could be very good for Kris King here. I would like probably to have seen him tap his mountain with his Ancient Tomb. He would have taken the 2 damage, but then he would have had 2 blue open.
Paul, let's leave that for when you and me are alone, buddy.
Little things in life.
Or maybe this is the next time you scrub with PTQ.
Oh!
So like the next PTQ. That's also a joke.
So we're going to see Snapcaster Brainstorm.
I might do a little dance for you.
So Spell Pierce is not open for Francisco anymore. He's tapped out, but we might see a Force of Will.
And this Blood Moon's on the stack.
Yeah, if we don't see Force of Will here, Francisco's in a very tough position.
And Francisco, maybe not having Blood Moon on his radar. He fetched multiple times this game and could have gone for basics. It seems.
Yeah, I think we see. I think we've actually only seen 1 fetch, so we would have had like 1 basic island, which would have been good. But we are going to see Force of Will here.
And if this, hopefully this is good enough, but I think Kris King's got some action. Tapping, interestingly, he could have just tapped the Ancient Tomb and the mountain, leaving 2 blue up.
That's what I said that, yeah. Earlier.
Sure, and that might have been a little misstep on his play if he does have. Here we have Force back, so Kris King, rightly so, valuing this Blood Moon, realizing that Francisco probably can't win the game with 2-1s with a 2-1 and 3 mountains in play.
You'd be very surprised, but I agree.
No, I wouldn't. That just happened to me. Here we go, Petals, so no more action.
You don't have anything to wait a minute.
So we have Lotus Petal Mountain open from Kris and Triple Mountain from Francisco. We do see Basic Island now, though, so that's...
Yeah, that's plus. And Snapcaster beats Commence. Very rare, but this could get there.
So I need
I might as well do that
and
then.
then if I hit, dice ranks 3. So
I get 6s and doing
We have Kris untapping.
oh, that's a miss. The next guy. Yeah, let's kill on him.
Kris King in his main phase going over options. No more gas, no more action. Possibly just reactive spells.
We did see a
So this guy,
show and tell get pitched from that Force of Will, so...
And here we have a Snapcaster. I think this is Ambush Viper. And Kris King in response brainstorming, thinking that, 4 turns a little bit more than 2 turn. Almost twice as much. And Kris King maybe realizing that he doesn't have enough time to have this Blood Moon.
Yeah, and this is one of the awkward things about Blood Moon is it actually does shut off your own game plan. If you can't fetch off after your brainstorms, if you can't actually tap your Ancient Tomb for extra mana, it kind of just makes your deck harder to pilot.
But now we see with the playing of the Blood Moon, Kris King getting basics completely makes sense.
Yeah, totally justifying his basics.
Maybe a little misstep not tapping the Ancient Tomb, but if he thinks that the only way Francisco gets out from under the Blood Moon is attacking with 2-1s, maybe that's the reason why he didn't tap that.
Definitely helps, as you do.
We have a draw from Kris.
And we see a Ponder
So that was
here.
already in his hand, potentially, from the Brainstorm.
Right.
Could have been one of the cards that he drew.
So Kris really needs to see have one of those cards be action, otherwise he needs to shuffle, and he does shuffle.
He's got 3 turns to find something, so.
Yeah. You could shoot that guy.
And with him shuffling here,
We'll leave him alone.
he's hard pressed. He's under the gun, even after this Blood Moon, which seemed very strong, cutting off Francisco's 3 sources of mana in play.
I don't like hanging on to that to wait after I make Fury Management mistakes.
and then
So we pass. We did see a shuffle, so new 3 on top. Kris hopefully going to be able to see something in the next 2 turns. Otherwise, yeah, he has to see something.
We could have a 3rd Snapcaster nature. That shortens the clock to 2 turns, and Kris King's outs are. How sick would it be if Kris just had the Pyroclasm though?
If Kris had the
We
Pyroclasm,
probably would have seen that turn.
yeah, probably would have seen that already.
this guy here is going to shoot.
What about the Echoing Truth? That would be
I am.
get him. I mean, by get him last the turn, but no, because Francisco would take 3 turns to redeploy. And here we have tapping of the mana. It looks like maybe a Jace, which would not be.
Did we see the sneak attack?
Here's the sneak attack. Show me the monster.
Oh well, we'll do this.
Interesting. I guess the Ancient Tomb's a mountain anyway.
Ancient Tomb is a mountain.
So, you know, fine. And if Kris King doesn't have anything to put into play on, he does. Activate Sneak Attack. Put in the Emrakul, and this should be enough to close out the game.
Because that gives me.
You might have to do a little bit of math, Polly. I know that's hard for you. And anyone watching, I know Polly personally, and friendly rubbins. And if this triggers on the stack, Francisco may just be out of this game.
Yeah, so we have...
He would keep a Snapcaster mage, so that's still a 3-turn clock. And putting on Kris would have to find some kind of action.
Right.
He'd go to 3, and if Kris doesn't have anything, this has happened to me where I've put an Emrakul in play, I've attacked, and I know Paul Lee can attest to this. You put your opponent down below, they sack all of their things, and then you don't do anything for the rest of the game, and you just die.
Right, and it's actually, so Kris only gets 2 more main phases after this one, if he does decide to keep the Snapcaster, which he does. So
Francisco, appropriately recognizing what stage of the game we're in, where...
Right, so we get a shuffle trigger off the Emrakul, and Kris has 2 more main phases to find a cantrip into a guy, or just top deck a guy, and so it's not looking too good for him, but hopefully he will see something. We're going to see Snapcaster come in for 3.
And with only 2 more draw steps, Kris is hard-pressed to close this game out.
Right.
His opponent's at 3, but...
We do have a kind of... We have 2 cards in hands. Like, I can't imagine what those cards are where it's actually just a dead card, because if we were counter spells, you would have used them earlier. If they are cantrips, you probably would have seen them. So we should just see it pass.
That's very good.
Kris with 1 more draw step.
So we draw a card. Probably not a dude.
Yeah.
Spell Pierce lands. Doesn't get there.
And you ever seen one of the issues with Sneak and Show is if you Gristlebrand is better than Emrakul. If you have life to work with to draw cards, you want the 7/7 more than the 15/15 because you can attack them. You can win all of their permanents and put them to 3. But then if you don't have anything to do the following turn, you could just die.
If we only had 2 Snapcasters.
Yeah, of course.
We did see 3 Snapcasters.
The 3rd Snapcaster was what put it over the edge, or it could have just been another land, right?
Right.
So like the 7th permanent was what got him out of the lock.
Yeah, and man, I've never ever seen somebody cast Blood Moon in the Sneak Attack deck and win the game.
Really?
I am very disappointed with that card.
I'm the opposite. It's been amazing for me.
Really?
There have been times where I blood moved my opponent and then like getting bolted out of the game or like from a Delver deck they play like you can still cast your Batter Skull, and if I'm not doing anything then they get to 5 minutes and play Batter Skull. Like
it just dilutes. I'm in combo decks. I'm very skeptical about siding in cards that aren't actually a part of your combo or fighting against hate. Like Blood Moon kind of fights against hate against Caracas, but I see a lot of people siding against like the Delver decks or the mid-range decks, and it does something. I just don't think it does enough.
I think the upside from you're absolutely right. There's a lot of times where you play a Blood Moon and it's not good enough. They get their basics in time. They natural draw their basics.
They naturally draw their basics and cast 3 Snapcasters.
That happens.
It just
but
happens.
I think the upside with your Soul Lands or Petals of going a turn 1 or 2 Blood Moon into a 3-color deck that like the Delver decks aren't playing basics. And if you can resolve a Blood Moon before you have Blood Moons and you have Pyroclasms against the Delver deck, right? So they even if with the Delver in play, you have an option to the Delver and you lock them out of casting spells, usually gets there.
Right. If you're just if you're citing out any amount of things that help your combo, though, even like cantrips, like if he cited out any number of preordains there, like if that's just another thing he could have had that game, that would have gotten him out of it. Possibly gotten him out of it. So, I don't know. We're gonna